Is the MLB going to expand to 32 teams? Rob Manfred recently stated that as quickly as the Tampa Bay and Oakland situations are resolved, they will put together an expansion committee to discuss increasing MLB teams from 30 to 32 teams. Well, what are the situations that Tampa Bay and Oakland are in? Oakland is potentially in the process of moving to Las Vegas, assuming Oakland doesn't fund their stay, or a different owner or the current owner doesn't fund their stay to stay in Oakland. They're looking at moving to Las Vegas. However, that's having some issues with funding and approvals. And with Tampa Bay, their lease is up in 4 years. And in previous years, there's been discussion of potential relocation. When these situations are resolved, the discussion on this potential expansion can be more complete, as in if the Athletics don't move to Las Vegas, one of the two expansion teams probably would become Las Vegas. If Tampa Bay were to relocate, they might relocate to a city that's already in the thought process or in the discussion or in the back of the mind of the MLB to become one of those new cities. The MLB's 2022 to 2026 labor deal also allows for expansion to 32 teams. Although the likelihood is thin that it would occur during this period, just based on the previous expectations of both Las Vegas and Tampa Bay being sorted out by then, but also the time frame that it would take to expand. Manfred stated that, "I hope shortly thereafter we will put together an expansion committee and start talking internally first, but the issues associated with expansion." He then stated, "Obviously there are economic issues. You're talking about diminishing the central revenue available to each and the 30 clubs making it 32. So what are the issues revolving around expansion? To a certain degree, it's revenue. If there's shared revenue per team, and if it gets diminished, as Manfred mentioned, that obviously might make it where there's less money to go around. In theory, by adding teams, you should create more revenue opportunities. So those opportunities would come from potentially more games. If you're going to keep the same amount of games per season, or maybe even lower them, by having 2 extra teams, you're going to have more games played. You may also potentially add more playoff games, whether it be through expansion of teams playing or just the amount of games being played. With more teams, you would expect potential better media partnerships or sponsorships in general, with the MLB having different media sponsorships and partnerships already, especially with Apple, YouTube, Bally Sports, Fox, ESPN. The addition of these games could potentially enhance the amount of money that's being made. It's rumored that these potential expansion teams could pay potentially up to $2 billion each, which would obviously potentially offset some of that revenue loss, assuming there would be a revenue loss. These expansion teams, if they're paying $2 billion, would also have to fund a new stadium, which you can probably assume is going to be partially paid for by the state or the city that they're going to be located in. And there would also have to be the development of their minor leagues. With expansion in other leagues, you don't have minor leagues to deal with or to worry about. In the Major League Baseball, you have minor leagues and spring training locations. With these new teams, you'd probably have about 4 to 5 additional teams in your minor league, along with your spring training location, which also might house one of those teams. Manfred also alluded to what the move to 32 teams would entail in terms of potential division realignment. He stated, "With my vision of expansion, you need to think about what you're trying to accomplish for the sport from a competitive perspective and deal with those issues before you get into one market." Manfred said, "And what do I mean by that? You're going to vote to approve 32 clubs, and you're going to make more divisional changes. So there's some internal work that's going to take some time to get done, and I think ultimately go to the markets. Depending on where these expansion teams are, which we already made a MLB expansion video, which can be seen down below in the comments and the description of the video, and it will be linked at the end of the video. There will also be a playlist for other expansion type videos that we've talked about and we'll be talking about in the future. So make sure you check that out. Depending on where these cities are located, how do you change the makeup of the league? The MLB used to have an offset alignment in the league to begin with when they had 16 in the NL and 14 in the AL. Before the Astros moved from the NL to the AL, National League Central had 6 teams, where the AL West had only 4 teams. So do you slide one team each into a specific division? Do you change the whole alignment of the league where maybe it's 4x4 instead of 5x3 now? Do you make it 8x2? That's a whole discussion that they'll have to have. which brings a lot to bear in mind because that affects scheduling. The MLB recently changed their scheduling as well, where there's more interconference play. Adding 2 additional teams would obviously affect how that all plays out. In terms of time frame, as we previously mentioned before, it's really up in the air. The Tampa Bay and Oakland situation could take years to figure out and completely settle. From there, you're going to create a committee, which again might take years to think about ideas and think how it's going to go. And then from there, you're going to have potential bidding processes or discussions with potential ownership groups on how it's going to go in terms of creating these teams and putting them into play. Within that spectrum, these ownership groups would have to also build stadiums. And if they're not funding them themselves, they're going to have to get funding from somewhere else, which would be government approval, which could also take potentially months or years to get done. Then when you're creating the stadium, that could potentially take years as well, depending on the location. Granted, you could play temporarily somewhere else. This all adds potential hiccups to the situation. Hey you, yes you, are you one of the 99% of viewers that are not subscribed to our channel? If so, scroll down and hit the subscribe button. When you're down there, be sure to also like this video. Now let's get back to this video. Going back to revenue, with the changes that occurred this year with time clocks and pitch clocks, there's actually been a shortened amount of time of the game being played, up to about 30 minutes. With this, actually decreases revenue as well. It decreases revenue from concession sales, potential ticket sales, potential sponsorship sales, and media sales. With having less airtime or eyes on the game, you're going to lose a lot of money. It almost seems like they're willing to expand to make up for what the game has changed to. Part of it, we believe, is also due to the fact that baseball is a growing sport, not necessarily in the United States, but internationally. Other leagues have gotten this right or are getting this right in the United States on picking up on international talents. The NFL has been scheduling games internationally really ever since the 90s with NFL Europe, but have taken a different approach for the last 10 or 15 years or so, with the addition of games in Mexico, the UK, and Europe, along with different player programs that have allowed these players to develop and come over. The NBA used to have a huge partnership with China. That has had a rocky road for the last few years, but they still do have a good bit of talent coming from Europe and other places as well. By building the sport internationally, you're also increasing eyes on your sport and increasing revenue. If you look at Shohei, granted he's a special player, he's a worldwide phenomenon, especially in Japan, in Asia. By having players such as that, along with other international stars coming to America, you're inherently increasing your audience. By doing so, you're potentially increasing your amount of investment groups that want to invest in the MLB, such as Saudi Arabia and the Middle East. You're increasing your potential sponsorship opportunities, your media rights licensing. Sure, it's great to have Apple TV, but what if some media company in Japan wants to pick up all the MLB games or re-air those games? Who knows? It doesn't really matter as long as you're making more money. In the general grand scheme of things, expansion probably should occur in the MLB. When, though, obviously has to be decided. And how, though, is something they will have to discuss and think about more in depth. Again, the competitive nature of MLB has to be kept intact. Not only are you competing against other baseball leagues, you're competing against the other big 4 or 5 and other sports leagues in America and around the world. The MLB does have dominance over the summertime season, especially worldwide, but that has always been trying to get chipped away at, especially recently with spring and summer football leagues. It should be interesting to see if and when they do expand the 32 teams. We'd love to know your thoughts on the subject, expansion locations, how should realignment occur, potential team names, potential issues that may occur. Feel free to leave your comments down below. And again, watch the expansion video that we made on the MLB. It should be linked down below in the comments and the description, and it should be shown pretty soon here. And check out the other expansion videos. We have about 5 or 10 different expansion videos we have on hold that we're waiting to release after we get to 1,000 subscribers. So again, if you're not subscribed, please subscribe, like the video, and thanks for watching.